Welcome to the Stressless Eating Podcast, where we help diet-obsessed and food-crazed women break themselves out of the food and body prison, end the dieting madness, and take control of their health for good. I'm your host, Leanne Ellington, and this podcast is about answering one question. How can you heal your relationship with food and your body and take a practical approach to this whole self-love journey, but without all that restriction, obsession, and shame, and without needing years of therapy to do so? If you want to know the answer, you're in the right place. All this information is 100% free, so please subscribe to and review our podcast. Okay, I have to admit that I have never fully been on board with this whole new year, new you stuff. And I'm assuming you're getting bombarded by messages about what you should start doing to make 2021 amazing right now, right? I mean, I know I am. Everything from diets to workouts to financial advice to dating advice to making money, you name it. I'm getting list after list of things that I need to start doing if I'm quote unquote serious about my success in the year ahead. But that's the problem. Most women aren't actually ready for this. In fact, they're suffering from what I refer to as the holiday hangover. And I see it all the time, especially with women. It's when the stress of making the holidays work or just running around like a chicken with your head cut off, more often than not, it just leads to overwhelm, burnout, frustration, and even some resentment. And then that creates not just a slowdown, but a shutdown in the new year. Especially this year specifically. It was a very interesting and unusual holiday season. And even though, what I'm hearing is a lot of people had a lot more downtime than they normally did, but they're still not feeling all rejuvened and ready to hit the pavement running. And so instead of starting strong, a lot of women don't start at all because they're disconnected and exhausted. Or they commit to setting new goals because they think that that's what they're supposed to do or what they should do or that it's better than doing nothing. But I want to lovingly disagree with that. Like, when is adding even more stuff to do really like adding more to your already overly busy and overwhelmed life? When has that been a good strategy? And since when was the answer to overwhelm and burnout to find even more to do? And so I dare you for the next, couple of days or next week or so, just don't buy anything from anyone, me included. Instead, give yourself what you really need right now, which is get yourself grounded, get yourself clear, like really get that clarity, like figure out what you really need. And take some time to clean up your headspace so that you have fertile soil to actually plant new roots and figure out what you actually want to and would be able to stick with before you commit to it. And sadly, like most women, they're not going to do this. Like most women are going to react and not respond to all the buy my stuff messages from every person that's trying to sell you something or every marketing expert out there. And just like last year, most women, unfortunately, will do nothing with 80% of whatever they buy. But those who do this, those who stop and get the clarity and really get intentional, wow, 2021 will look very different indeed. I promise you that, okay? In fact, I'm going to double down on my invitation to you by helping you do exactly as I described and show you how to really make this year different, as in for real. And I'm going to show you a process that I personally do every single year to make sure that I'm getting myself started on the right foot. So let's go ahead and dive on in. So a few years ago, when I was ringing in the new year, I decided to switch things up and do something totally different. And so instead of my normal resolutions that I was slowly but surely learning didn't last very long, like just like the year before that or the year before that, I wanted to shake things up. And so I took out a piece of paper and I wrote at the top of it, my best year yet. And the year that I did this, it was a crazy year. And interestingly enough, I actually did a lot of journaling that year. So I was able to really go back and dig those out and check those out before I recorded this episode. And so the first half of that year, it threw me some major challenges and curveballs that tested me. And then the second half of that year was spent making my own self-care just priority numero uno. Like I really needed to put myself first and like keep myself happy and healthy. And then and only then could I and would I have been able to thrive and really pour into other people. And so hence probably my decision to take out a piece of paper and write my best year yet at the top. And so obviously I was ready to make that next year better than the last, right? But I also remember this because it was very intentional and it was starkly different than my normal New Year's resolutions thought process. And so I remember sitting there with like my old school, pen and paper, probably a number 2 pencil because I really liked those. And I was staring at the paper and I distinctly remember seeing 2 different scenarios in my mind. One was my normal way of thinking and resolution making and goal setting mindset. And one was what was like at the time kind of forming in my mind as I went, but it was a totally different thought process because normally I wouldn't have written my best year yet. I would have written things like, things I want to accomplish in the new year or goals for the new year or something like that. But making it my best year yet after a few minutes, that didn't actually seem like the most fitting or powerful thing for me either. But making it my best year yet, or I guess I should say like in my mind, my best year yet, it just created more mental pictures of goals and actions and hustle and accomplishing things like, goals around my body, my business, whatever I wanted to accomplish at the time. And I also remember noticing the theme or pattern, like these were all measurements that I had been using or using something like it to measure myself in the past, like really measure my self-worth. And then I remember it like yesterday, like I remember having this light bulb moment and I immediately scratched out the word best. And instead I wrote in the word happiest. And as soon as my thinking shifted from my best year yet to my happiest year yet, it's as if more like one by one, more light bulbs just started clicking on and turning on. And so now in my mind, the picture of my life, it became about experiences. It became about joy. Like it became about my thoughts and how I wanted to feel and who I wanted to be. And the conversation about stress, like it became about making sure there was way less stress in my future. And again, it was just such a different shift when I just went from my best year yet, or like my most successful, to my happiest year. And that's when it hit me. Like when I'm focusing on becoming the like air quotes best or most successful version of myself, I'm usually focusing on things outside of me, like all the external accomplishments, like the hustle, the grind, the needing to prove, the measuring sticks, those golden carrots that I would dangle in front of my nose, right? And consequently, it was usually the stuff that like it would cause me stress or the stuff that I was always feeling like I wasn't doing a good enough job of, like according to my standards, of course. And so, of course, I'd always need to raise the bar higher and then higher again and then higher again. Like it would never end because when you're living in a self-image of I'm never good enough or it's never good enough, which is where I was living at the time, you'll never be satisfied. And so this is where, well, I'm just going to kind of peel back the curtain and show you how my brain works. Like I distinctly remember this, and thankfully, like I said, I kept a lot of journals around this time, so I had the good fortune of going back and reading all the thoughts and ahas that I had at the time. But this is where one of the other voices in my head chimed in, or I guess you could say it's where one of my other brains took over, and the geek in me was now doing the thinking. And she was like, wait a minute, when you're stressed out, you've also got all of those stress hormones floating through your body, like cortisol, adrenaline, epinephrine, and they're mopping up every breath, step, and bite that you take. But when you're happy, you have all those happy hormones sweeping through your body, swimming along next to every breath, step, and bite that you take. And this whole thought process, interestingly enough, this is what would eventually turn into my whole Tale of Two Cookies philosophy, which you can find in the Tale of Two Cookies episode of this podcast, which we'll link in the show notes for you. But at the time, this was just one of the voices in my head. And then another voice chimed in, and this time it was like the amateur psychologist, philosophical woo-woo version of myself, and she chimed in and said, the idea of my best, it's always going to be my perception of my best or my opinion of the best, or a comparison that I'm making to something or someone that I already know. Or maybe it's a comparison to someone I don't know, but that I'm comparing, I make up words all the time. But when I'm comparing myself to when that comparisonitis version of me comes out, right? But when I'm focusing on becoming the happiest version of myself, it becomes my own special, like 1 in a million recipe. Like no one in the entire world has my version of happy. And the only comparing happening is how I feel and how I want to feel and how to keep heading in that direction. Again, a very different thought process, but that's when there was like this back and forth in my head between like the you should strive for your best voice and my you should strive for your happiest voice. And then it wasn't too long before I was poof, back in the present moment, writing my list out for happiest. Like obviously that voice won. And so back to reality and back to you. Where does this involve you, right? So as you probably guessed, judging from the title of this episode, I did eventually decide to focus on making that my happiest year yet. And I've literally been doing the same exercise every single year since then. And here's why, okay? Focusing on creating my happiest self, it forces me to rely on the internal compass that's inside of me. And that thing is firing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, even on Christmas, New Year's, and my birthday. It doesn't ever take a day off. But it's up to me to make sure that I tune in, because happiness is personal. Taking care of your happiness, it's also super personal. And the way I define it, self-care means taking care of your emotional, physical, mental, spiritual, relational, all of it, taking care of all of yourselves and all of your happiness. So therefore, self-care is also personal. Okay, so since the title of this episode is all about having your happiest year yet, I'm going to say something that you might not want to hear, and it might be the unpopular opinion, but I have to say it because, again, if we're talking about making this your happiest year yet, we've got to figure out how to do that. And so I'm going to say it. And here's what I'm going to say. I invite you to ditch the New Year's resolutions, okay? And I know, but Leanne, it's a new year and it's a new beginning and there's new energy. And yes, it absolutely is. And that's why I'm saying it. Because if you actually want this year to be different, you have to be different. And so you have to think differently. You've got to act differently. You got to get off the cycle of insanity. And so, yes, I'm saying it, like, let's ditch the New Year's resolutions. And yeah, I get it. Everyone is offering you a new year, new you challenge or a jumpstart or a kickstart. And after the new year, it is super tempting to want to just do something. And that's why most women do end up impulsively committing to a Whole30 or keto or going back to Weight Watchers for the umpteenth time. And there's no judgment. I totally get it. I used to do the same thing every single year, this time of year, especially this time of year. But here's what I can tell you with 1000% certainty. This idea that there is one diet or one eating plan or one New Year's resolution that will change your life, that is a myth. We are all well aware now that dieting doesn't work. In fact, dieting and restriction is the number one cause of overeating and binging. And yeah, it's true. Like, it's a true story. It's a proven, researched, scientific fact that restriction and dieting is the number one cause of overeating and binging, or just like going off the deep end or feeling out of control. And so going on yet another 30-day challenge or another New Year's resolution, it's the slowest, most tedious, and most ineffective way to get the permanent results that you are looking for. In fact, it's a surefire way to make things worse, and I can prove it. I used to see it all the time when I was in the fitness industry. Like, as I shared, heck, like the new year, new you, New Year's resolution mentality, that was the mentality that I had most of my life. And so, yeah, like, full disclosure and no shame, because I didn't know what I didn't know. But yeah, I would actually participate in all of those New Year, New You restrictive challenges with my clients. Like, it seems like eons ago, but yes, that was what I did every single year. And just like my clients, I was living, 6-week challenge to 6-week challenge and committing to a 30-day sprint after another 30-day sprint, or just jumping from one short-term program to another short-term program. And it exhausted me. It sucked the life out of me. And the worst part was, it didn't even work. Not in the long term, at least. And because, as soon as I went off of it, and I always eventually went off of it, because like, who can live like that forever? I would go way off. It's like my inner rebel would kick in and say, screw it, and then proceed to eat as much junk as humanly possible. And this would go on, of course, until my inner food police would come out and judge and shame me for being so unhealthy or out of control, and then force me to get back on that like proverbial wagon, get back on it again. And this would happen every single time. It would happen every single year. And sometimes it would last 30 days and some days it would last 60, but the same cycle would play out, because the truth is, all diets work. Like, they all work. All those short-term resolutions even work until they don't work anymore. And so things go great for 30 days or 6 weeks, but what happens after that? Well, it's that dreaded bounce back effect that we've talked about, and it happens every single time. And so, yeah, you lose some weight, you gain some momentum, but then you gain it back, and usually it comes with interest. Like, it is totally an unwinnable game, ladies. And so for me, it didn't matter what the game was. Like, each time I committed to another 30-day challenge, or I went back to Weight Watchers for the 1,000th time, or I just promised myself I would start logging again, or whatever I was doing, go to the gym, you name it, I believed myself less and less each time I told myself it was going to be different. Like, every time I started it, I would say that I was ready, or I would say like, this time's different, or I'm way more committed than the last time, or like, this time I'm for real. But I really believed myself less each time, because I knew deep down that nothing had really changed since the last time I did it, since the last time I made promises to myself, and since the last time I made promises to myself that I didn't keep. Like, this was that Groundhog's Day that I lived on for most of my life until I stopped the madness. And this was the Groundhog's Day that my clients had also been living on most of their life until they stopped the madness. And chances are, if you're listening to this right now, you know exactly what I mean. Like, you've probably been doing it too. But on top of that, if you're like almost every woman on this planet right now, you're being invited or tempted by yet another 30-day challenge, or like told to make New Year's resolutions, or invited to join some short-term intense program. Like, Facebook and Pinterest and Instagrammers and local gyms, they are screaming about it from the rooftops. And I get it. It is super, super tempting to just want to jump on something, right? But I'm here to ask you again and totally reiterate, do you really want another 30-day challenge? Like, do you really want to just make another resolution that you don't stick to? Do you really want another diet? Do you really want to play the short-term game knowing that it's not gonna last? Like, do you really want to put yourself through that again? And again, like, no judgment, but like, really, isn't that what you did last year and the year before that and the year before that? And if that's the case, I'm here to ask you, how is this year really going to be any different? Like, if the last 30-day challenge that you tried really did become a lifestyle, and the last resolution that you set, if it really did stick, then I say awesome. Like, keep doing that, keep going for it. But if it didn't, right, and you're still living in that on again, off again, all or nothing roller coaster with food, your body, your health, your emotions, right? I invite you to consider a different strategy, because think about it. Like, we're not just talking about the next 30 days of your life here. We're not just talking about January or this year even. We're talking about the rest of your life. And do you really want to be starting and stopping and starting and stopping diets and 30-day challenges and resolutions for the rest of your life? Like, personally, I want more for you than that. And so, like I said, there is no judgment. Like, I live like that for most of my life, but that's why I know that it's no way to live. And so if you're sick of spending a ton of time and energy, thinking about food and counting and tracking and weighing and measuring and obsessing over your body, obsessing over what you eat, and if you're sick of ignoring your hunger and that empty stomach because you're trying to diet, or always playing mind games on yourself to try to stick with something, or if you feel like just out of control of food, or you feel like you're handcuffed to a diet because you feel out of control when you're not handcuffed to a diet, and if you're sick of taking the harder and slower approach to figuring out the whole food and body and health and really happiness puzzle, I invite you not to commit to yet another New Year's resolution that you're not really going to follow through on. It is like the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So what's my point of all of this? Really, I want to bring you back to making sure that this really is a different year for you. Like, that this really is different by starting at a different place than you usually do. And so instead of starting with goals and resolutions, what if you started with happy? What if you ditched becoming, better in any of the ways or quantifiables that you've been using to measure yourself up until now? Things like scale weight or jean size or how much you ate that day or your income, your relationship status, as in like completely threw away all of those measuring sticks as your primary measuring sticks of success. And instead, you simply focused on measuring your happiness. And again, most women don't actually know how to do that. But what if you started there? What if you focused on making this coming year your happiest year yet? What if you loved your way happy? What if you loved your way healthy instead of restricting your way to health or restricting your way to happiness, or, self-criticizing and self-loathing your way there? Because again, if you're anything like me and the women that I work with, like it hasn't ever gotten you there, and it won't, right? And so this side of things, like committing to my happiest year yet, this is what I've committed to myself, because just like you, I can get bogged down measuring and weighing myself on things that don't really serve me and on things that don't really make me happy. And trust me, like I said, I've used everything from the size of my jeans to how much I ate that day to how much money was in my bank account or how many likes I got on Facebook. Like if there was a way to measure my self-worth or my success on something external, trust me, I've used it, I've done it. So there's absolutely no judgment here. I mean, we all do it, and doing it isn't even a bad thing either. Like measuring and tracking and accounting for anything, it can be super powerful and a super useful tool if you use it as a tool, not as a weapon against yourself to shame yourself or make yourself feel bad. But it's not about this being a better or worse way to set goals for yourself. That's not what I'm saying. It's about using different goggles than you've been using, ones that I know will make all the difference in the world in terms of how you feel every single second of every single day. Like easily, happily, and indefinitely, not just now and in January, indefinitely. And so this is me double dog daring you to take a break from all your normal measuring sticks. And yes, you better believe I'm always simultaneously double dog daring myself to take a break from my own and go make this year and next year your happiest year yet. I have a feeling that if you do that, if you start at happy, the rest will fall seemingly into place.
Thanks for tuning in to today's show. If you like what you heard and you're interested in breaking out of your own food, body, and diet prison, here's what I want you to do next. Head on over to stresslesseating.com. That's stresslesseating.com. And sign up to watch the Stressless Eating webinar, where I'll walk you through the exact 5-step game plan my female clients use to conquer emotional eating, self-sabotage, and finally heal themselves from the restrictive all-or-nothing diet mentality for good, but without obsessing or spending years in therapy to address it. I've laid it all out for you there in 5 easy steps. Remember, healing your relationship with food and your body does not happen by itself. You need expert guidance to make it happen, and we've helped clients all over the world take back their power from the food and find true and lasting freedom while enjoying life and warm chocolate chip cookies along the way. To see if we can help you do the same, head on over to stresslesseating.com. I'm Leanne Ellington, and I'll see you next time.